This episode is for anybody like myself who struggles with repeating the same patterns over and over again and going back to the same things that they've already done that have already showed them that it's not right for them, right? It's not aligned. This is something that I have had to think about, process a lot throughout my life. I've been in therapy for many years, working on this stuff in the pages of my journal. I've really had to sit and think about these things. And for me, I've come to the conclusion and awareness that when you do find yourself back in those old patterns, there's a reason for it. And that reason is what you have to risk in order to break out of that loop. And it's not easy to risk those things because oftentimes I find that the thing that we tend to latch onto that keeps us in these cycles and these patterns, it's often promises of things being better or being perfect, or that this time around things will be different, that finally we'll be able to get that thing or that circumstance that will make our lives safe and okay. That is really hard to let go of, right? To accept that things won't be that way. But truly that is what you need to do, right? It's on the other side of that acceptance that you're able to break out of those cycles and those patterns. So I think it's really important that if you struggle with this, to get clear on what the reason is behind why you always go back. And that can be going back to a relationship with someone that just doesn't quite work. It's very unsatisfying, and you know that and you've experienced it already, but you think, okay, this time around maybe it'll be different. It could be a type of career or a job or something that you think, if I just stick this out, or if I just do this again, or if I just try, maybe this will be the solution to all my problems of what would make me respectable in the eyes of others. The thing I should be doing. Maybe this will make me feel more aligned with that, right? With who I should be. Or maybe it's just a creative endeavor, right? Maybe it's something you've been trying to work on, a project of some sort that just doesn't quite work or fit for you. And yet you keep trying and going back, even though it just does not work. And obviously there is something to be said about, resilience and persistence in the face of your resistance. Yes, you have to oftentimes push through the things that are holding you back, right? Blocks that are preventing you from getting to what is actually truly aligned with you. That's different though. If this is something that has shown you time and again, it just does not work. It just does not flow. Not that it is something that's aligned with you, but requires you to, step out of your comfort zone, do things that are kind of scary sometimes, right? As anything good and worthwhile is, or forces you to be. That's different than when you realize that something is not quite right for you and you've seen it time and again. It does not work. It's not for you, because if it were to work, it would work with time, with persistence, with resilience. But you keep falling into the same pattern. You keep getting sucked into the same patterns, and you're seeing the same thing over and over again, the same results, and they're not working. They're not satisfying for you. It's really important to understand what it is for you that gets you into those cycles and patterns. So it might be, maybe it has to do with your physical appearance, right? Maybe it has to do with your feelings of being capable, or just generally of being worthy as a human being. Maybe it's those reasons that are keeping you in the same place, that keep you going back to the same things. That's what I think is more important to tackle. And of course, I am not a therapist. These are just the things I've literally had to work on all the time by myself, for myself. These are the things that I've come to understand as the reason why I go back to the same patterns and behaviors and people. Because you'll find yourself going back to these things. You'll find yourself stepping into a new circumstance and realize that it's exactly the same as the last one. It just looks different. It's just been masquerading as something else. Really, they're all the same, because every time we're operating from that place of this time will be better, or I will finally find that thing that'll make me feel good enough, or feel perfect, or feel respectable, or feel accepted, or whatever it is for you. It's usually the same pattern, that same thing behind the scenes, right? It's been that same thing behind the curtain this entire time. And you always realize it, right? You look back, and I'm sure anybody who understands this and who relates to this knows what I'm saying, right? You look back at that thing and you realize that was exactly the same person. I dated the same exact person as the last one, or the same circumstance, the same goal. It was all hiding a very specific reason for why I went back to this kind of thing. That reason is what needs to be plucked out of your psyche so that you can look at it deeper. You can really examine it and understand what's going on there. Because without seeing it for what it is and understanding it, you can't heal this part of you. You can't finally break out of these patterns and cycles that keep you stuck and often distract you from what is actually authentic for you. Because that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to make you believe that your worth, your value, your acceptance, your whatever, your validity is with this specific circumstance that you've already tried, that does not work, but might seem more valid on the outside, right? It might feel like something that is more acceptable to others. It's what you've been told to do, whatever it is for you. It'll convince you that that's the way to go, even though you've done it many times already and you've already seen that it's not the way to go. It doesn't feel quite right for you. Every time you step into it, it's not authentic. You're playing a role that isn't for you. And yet it'll disguise itself every single time to make you do it again and again and again. All that does is really distract you from your truth, right? It distracts you from your authenticity. And ultimately, these are all you, right? You're distracting you from yourself. You're distracting you from your authenticity. You're avoiding yourself because it's scary to see ourselves, face ourselves, accept ourselves, especially the things that are authentic and true for us that might not be what others want from us or what we think others want from us. That risks rejection. It risks not being accepted, and that's really terrifying. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that the thing that you're being called back to over and over again, the thing you're being pulled back to, not even called back to, because I like to separate the idea of being called to something from that deeply resonates with you, right? Something that is truly authentic for you will call to you, it'll beckon to you, and it'll be difficult to not fall back into it because it's something that is so deeply connected to you, right? I'm talking about the things that pull you back in, that suck you back in when you don't really want to be there, but because they feel like the right thing to do based on somebody else's expectations of you, you fall back into those patterns. And because they're familiar too, right? Those things, those familiar patterns that are not satisfying, that are not aligned with you, are often satisfying something that you believe you lack, something that's lacking within you. But this lack is a perceived lack. It might not at all be true, right? So you might be feeling like you lack, again, a physical appearance that is acceptable to someone else, or capability, or inherent worth, or being good at whatever it is for you. You might feel like you lack something. Getting clear on what that feeling is, and understanding that that feeling of lack will always make you seek things out to make yourself feel whole. You'll always be seeking to feel whole. You'll never feel complete as you are enough to then pursue the things that you want to pursue that are genuinely calling to you from an authentic place. So if you're always seeking to be made whole because you feel like you are lacking something, then of course you're going to be drawn back into the same patterns that are familiar, that have been promised to you to give you, the ultimate life you want to live, right? It's easier to listen to the authority of somebody else, right? Someone else telling you that this is the way to do it, this is the thing that's going to make you perfect or good enough or whatever, than it is to accept that you'll never be perfect, because nobody can be, and that you will have to disappoint people sometimes, and you can't always live up to other people's expectations and then follow what is authentically for you. That's so much harder than just doing the thing that you think you should do. But what happens is you do that thing you think you should do and you realize it's not satisfying and it doesn't work out. And so you have to go back to the drawing board, and maybe you're being called back to that thing that's really aligned with you, but you're scared, you resist it. And so you go to this other thing that is, promising you all these, acceptances and the respectability of being good enough and all that stuff. And you do a new thing that promises those to you, and you realize it's exactly the same as the thing you did before. And now you've wasted more time doing exactly the same thing that just looks a different way, when you could have spent that time on what is true and authentic for you. And this isn't to shame anybody for this. I get into these all the time. This happens to me constantly, and I see myself do it, and I recognize it afterwards. But I'm getting better at noticing it much sooner than I have in the past, right? And it saves me a lot of time. And so now I'm much more aware of it, and I can understand it for what it is. And it reveals to me more things that I think I have to work on, right? Things that I believe are lacking within me that might not actually be true. Those are just beliefs that are maybe conditioned into me by other people or society or culture, whatever. So I think it's really important, if you struggle with this, to try and get clear on what the reason is for you going back to those relationships, those career opportunities, whatever it is for you. What's the reason? What are you trying to satisfy? What do you think will be fulfilled if you go back to them? What are the promises that are being made here? And what do you believe you're lacking? All those things will make it very clear for you, and you have to really ruminate on them and understand them for what they are, and call yourself out in the moments when you notice you're doing that thing again. This is the exact same thing. It just has a different mask on. But, if you were to continue on this path, you'll realize that you've just spent time again doing the same thing Now, of course, sometimes you have to do the same thing again to understand it for what it is, to see it clearly. We have to make the same mistakes over and over again to really understand what we feel about them sometimes. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just more about encouraging awareness. So if you were to do that thing again, to really hold yourself accountable and be clear about it and say, you know what? Yeah, I did that thing again. Why did I do it again? What have I learned from it this time? And then you probably will do it again. It's hard to break out of these. You'll probably do it again the next time around. Okay, I did it again. What enticed me and lured me in this time? Why did it seem different? What can I take away from this? And that's really, I think, the point of all of this work that we do. It's not about being perfect. It's not about fixing yourself. It's just about being aware and understanding what those behaviors are and where they stem from and the patterns that they lead you to. And if those patterns are even good for you, if you want them to continue in your life. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it gave you something to think about, journal about potentially. If you want to talk about this with me in more detail, you can book a one-to-one call over my website. Like I said, I'm not a therapist. I just love talking about these things. And I think it's really helpful to have someone to bounce these ideas off of. So if you want to pick my brain, feel free to book a call over there. I also wrote a Substack essay about this. So I go into more detail over on my Substack if you want to read that and support my work over there as well. And then for all my short form content, feel free to follow me on TikTok and Instagram. Other than that, thank you for being here, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.